They never wanted you to know this. Not the monks who guarded it in the Himalayan snows. Not the Viking clans who used it to walk through blizzards, half naked like ghosts of fire. And definitely not the modern world that keeps you soft, cold, and dependent. This technique was considered dangerous, forbidden, a kind of inner ignition that only warriors were allowed to practice. But today, I'm breaking that seal. I'm handing you the fire breath, the real one, the one that turns your body into a furnace and bends cold to your will. You're about to learn the exact protocol the Vikings used when they believed a man must be able to generate heat from his bones, not from a blanket. And here's the part that should scare you. Modern science finally caught up and proved it works. It triggers a neurobiological chain reaction so intense that researchers once thought the data was wrong. But listen closely. This isn't a breathing exercise. This is a weapon, a metabolic ignition switch. And once you activate it, nothing inside you stays the same. If you're still here, good. You're ready to hear what was never meant for ordinary people. You feel it, don't you? The slow decline, the softness creeping in, the way a gust of cold wind bites deeper than it should, the way fatigue settles into your spine long before the day is over. Modern life has stripped you of something essential. The primal circuitry your ancestors depended on to survive winters that would kill most people today. Your internal fire is asleep, and that should terrify you. You weren't built to shiver under jackets. You weren't built to store fat like a hibernating animal. You were built to generate heat, to command your metabolism like a weapon, to switch from weakness to power in an instant. But years of comfort have smothered that instinct. The brown fat that once blazed inside you is dormant. The neural pathways that once made you resilient are fading. Your body is stuck in energy conservation mode. And every day you stay this way, the prison tightens. But here's the truth you've sensed your whole life. You are not meant to be fragile. There is a wild architecture inside you, waiting. Viking fire breath is the key that forces it awake. Fast, brutally, undeniably, science tried to dismiss it. For decades, researchers believed no human could raise their core temperature using breath alone. Impossible, they said. Myth, folklore, placebo. And yet, when they finally strapped sensors onto the few who still practice the forbidden fire breath, the data refused to obey their assumptions. Body temperature rising, catecholamines surging, metabolism exploding, a neurochemical storm igniting from nothing but controlled breath and intention. That was the moment the scientific world realized. The Vikings and the Himalayan adepts weren't mystics. They were engineers of the nervous system. Here's what modern biology finally uncovered. Fire breath hits the sympathetic nervous system like a hammer. With every rapid inhale, you drive oxygen deep into tissue. With every forceful exhale, you push CO2 just low enough to activate a primal alarm in the brainstem. That alarm unlocks a cascade. Adrenaline spikes. Norepinephrine floods the bloodstream. Blood vessels tighten then dilate in a controlled wave. Inside your fat cells, mitochondria flip into overdrive, awakening UCP1, the same thermogenic protein newborns use to survive cold. At the same time, your brain releases BDNF, the molecule of resilience, sharpening neural pathways like a blade sliding across whetstone. This is why warriors reported clarity bordering on supernatural. This is why they stood shirtless in storms while others froze. Fire breath is not magic. It's neuromechanics, a biological furnace hidden under your ribs, waiting for the right sequence to ignite. And you're about to learn that sequence. Now we go deeper into the exact mechanism that terrified early physiologists, because it broke too many rules. When you perform Viking fire breath correctly, you aren't just breathing harder. You are deliberately altering the oxygen-carbon dioxide ratio in your bloodstream to trigger what I call the hypoxic ignition point. In that narrow biochemical window, your body behaves like a different species. Here's what actually happens inside you. The rapid, rhythmic inhalations supercharge your hemoglobin with oxygen, while the sharp exhales purge CO2 faster than normal. CO2 is the signal that tells your brain you're safe. Remove enough of it, and the brainstem flips into survival mode. Not panic, controlled activation. This shift unleashes a burst of norepinephrine so strong, it can raise circulating levels by 200 or 300%. The same surge measured in subjects immersed in ice water, yet performed without touching the cold. And then comes the real secret. Mitochondria uncoupling. UCP1, the heat-generating protein buried inside brown fat, switches on like Viking iron meeting sparks. Instead of storing energy, your cells begin wasting it as heat, flooding your torso with an unmistakable internal warmth. This is why adepts could dry wet cloths on their skin in freezing winds. This is why Vikings crossed snowfields with steam rising from their bodies. You are not creating heat from the outside. You are breaking the metabolic governor inside you and allowing the ancient furnace to roar. Most people never reach this state. They breathe shallow, timid, afraid of their own biology. But you're about to cross that line deliberately. Before you ignite the furnace, you must prepare the chamber. This is where most people fail, not because the technique is hard, but because they rush in without priming the nervous system. The Vikings understood something modern practitioners forget. The body won't release its inner fire unless it senses discipline, focus, and stillness before the storm. So you create that stillness. Sit with your spine straight, not rigid, but alert, like a warrior waiting for a signal. The room should be cool. A slight chill sharpens the hypothalamus and makes the ignition more responsive. No distractions, no music, no scrolling. Your brain needs to know this is not another moment of noise. This is a ritual. Place your hands on your thighs and feel the weight of your body anchoring you. That physical grounding signals to your vagus nerve that you are safe enough to go deep, but alert enough to control the sympathetic surge that is coming. Now bring your attention to the lower abdomen. This region, just below the navel, is where the Vikings claimed the first spark rests. Whether you believe the mythology or not doesn't matter. Focusing here stabilizes your diaphragm and primes the respiratory muscles that will drive the fire breath. 1 minute of calm, rhythmic breathing is enough. Not to relax, but to sharpen. You're telling your biology, prepare. Something powerful is about to begin. This is the spine of the entire system. The exact breath cycle that turns theory into fire. Do not improvise. Do not soften it. Follow every detail, because each second of this sequence presses a different biochemical switch, and when they lock together, the ignition happens. Inhale through your nose sharply, deep into the lower abdomen, as if dragging air down to the pelvis. The diaphragm must drop hard. You should feel the belly expand first, then the ribs, then the upper chest, a 3-tiered expansion that pulls oxygen into the deepest corners of your lungs. Then, exhale through the mouth in a fast, forceful release, like fogging a winter window. Not a sigh, a projection. Short, clean, aggressive. 1 inhale, 1 exhale. That's a single strike. You will deliver 30 strikes in a row without pausing. The rhythm is everything. Not too fast, or you'll spin into dizziness before the chemistry sets. Not too slow, or you'll lose the sympathetic momentum. Think of it as a drumbeat, driving an army forward. Steady, relentless, controlled. Around breath 20, you'll feel pressure building in the chest, heat pooling under the ribs, a faint electric buzz behind the eyes. Good. That's the catecholamines rising. Keep going. When the 30th exhale empties out, stop, hold. Do not breathe in. This retention phase is the doorway. Your CO2 is low, your oxygen is high, and your brainstem is confused enough to open the internal vault. Let the stillness swallow you. Your heartbeat will thicken. Your body will feel weightless and heavy at the same time. Stay until your instincts tug for air. Then inhale once, deeply, sharply, filling everything. Hold that inhale for 15 seconds. This seals the sympathetic surge and pushes oxygen into the tissues that need it most. When you release, you will feel the first true spark of internal heat flicker to life. That entire sequence is 1 round. Beginners do 2 rounds. Warriors do 4. But even a single round, executed with precision, can change the way your body behaves for hours. Now you step into territory that was once reserved for warriors. The advanced layer that transforms heat from a flicker into a surge. The basic breath cycle awakens the furnace, but this layer teaches you to shape the fire, to pull it through the body like molten metal under your command. This isn't imagination for comfort. This is neuromechanical visualization, the kind that rewires how your sympathetic system distributes energy. Do it correctly, and the heat doesn't just rise, it erupts. As you complete the exhale of your final strike and drop into retention, shift your awareness to the point just below your navel. Picture, not softly but with brutal clarity, a small coal glowing in darkness. That image is not symbolic. It activates motor neurons tied to your diaphragm and pelvic floor, increasing microtension that amplifies internal pressure. With every second of the hold, imagine the coal brightening, then expanding, then cracking its shell. Heat will begin to spread through your abdomen in waves. You're not producing fantasy. You're guiding the sympathetic spike to concentrate in the core rather than disperse randomly. When the urge to inhale hits and you draw in that deep refill, hold it. And now imagine the heat rushing upward along the spine. Many describe it as a vertical lightning strike. That sensation corresponds with lactate accumulation and a rapid burst in BDNF release, sharpening the brain like steel being quenched. Your ribs may feel warm. Your back may throb with pressure. That is the fire path activating. During this 15-second hold, add a subtle contraction of the lower abdomen. Not a full brace, but a coiling, as if containing a force that wants to break upward. This traps the thermogenic surge, intensifies it, and extends its lifespan long after the breath ends. When you release the inhale, do it slowly, controlled, as if letting the fire settle into the muscles, the bloodstream, the mind. This is the layer that separates practitioners from wielders. The heat you've created isn't meant to stay trapped inside ritual. The Vikings didn't practice fire breath in quiet rooms. They used it to conquer the cold, to carve resilience into their biology until winter itself became an ally. This is where breath meets environment, where the internal furnace is tested, tempered, and strengthened. The moment you finish your rounds, your body is primed. Mitochondria awake, norepinephrine elevated, brown fat switched on like a row of ancient engines. This is the perfect time to step into the cold and forge the adaptation loop. You don't need snowfields or icy rivers. A cold shower is enough. The rule is simple. Enter while the fire is still alive. Don't wait. Don't let the warmth fade. When the cold hits your skin, your instincts will scream to retreat. But this moment is the algorithm. The shock sends a second spike of norepinephrine surging through your bloodstream. Instead of shivering, your awakened brown fat begins combusting energy to protect you. Two forces collide. External cold, triggering survival pathways, internal fire amplifying them. This is how you re-educate the hypothalamus, the command center of temperature regulation, to stop overreacting to cold and start thriving in it. Stay under the cold for 20 to 60 seconds, long enough for your breathing to settle into control again. The first 10 seconds are war. The next 20 are recalibration. Your body begins to realize it is not dying, it is adapting. That recognition is what hardens your resilience. Step out, breathe normally, and feel the equilibrium. Heat rising from the inside, cold pressing from the outside. A perfect tension that sculpts a new baseline for your nervous system. Do this consistently, and cold stops being an enemy. It becomes a catalyst, a training partner, a trigger for deeper transformation. Now we enter the domain most people care about, fat loss. But few understand the real mechanism behind why fire breath melts fat faster than conventional training. This is not about burning calories. That language is primitive and outdated. What you're doing here is rewiring metabolic code, forcing your body to abandon its comfortable storage patterns and shift into a survival-driven combustion mode your ancestors relied on to stay alive in frozen landscapes. When you perform the breath cycles, especially combined with cold exposure, your brown fat doesn't just activate, it begins consuming white fat to fuel the thermogenic engine. White fat is storage, brown fat is fire, and fire breath converts one into the other by increasing mitochondrial density and upregulating UCP1, the molecular switch that determines whether energy is saved or sacrificed. This is why elite cold-adapted individuals can increase metabolic rate by hundreds of % without moving a muscle. Their bodies have learned to choose heat over hoarding. But the secret lies deeper. The massive release of norepinephrine triggered by the breath cycle doesn't just heighten focus. It breaks the seals around stubborn fat deposits, signaling them to open and dump fatty acids into the bloodstream for combustion. Paired with the hypoxic burst from breath retention, this creates a metabolic storm. Oxygen-rich tissues pulling in fatty acids, mitochondria burning hotter than usual, and the furnace inside your torso demanding fuel. Fat becomes fuel. Fuel becomes heat. Heat becomes resilience. Most training methods fight fat indirectly. This one recruits fat into the war effort. You're not losing fat. You're weaponizing it. And once your biology learns this pattern, it doesn't forget. It becomes your new default, even at rest. Fire breath doesn't just remake your body. It forges your mind into something harder, sharper, more unshakable. What the Vikings described as the steel spirit was not poetry. It was neurobiology decades ahead of its time. When you push your breath, your chemistry, and your limits into controlled stress, your brain releases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The molecule warriors would have worshipped if they'd known its name. BDNF strengthens neural pathways, repairs damaged ones, and builds new circuits that make your mind more resilient to fear, cold, fatigue, and chaos. It's like upgrading the wiring of your inner fortress. But there's something even more striking. The breath-induced surge in catecholamines doesn't just heighten alertness. It sharpens perception. Colors look clearer. Sounds feel more precise. Thoughts become cleaner, faster. You step into a state that ancient fighters described as ice clarity, where your emotions stop dragging you, and your mind cuts through hesitation like a blade through frost. This is the sympathetic system, no longer in panic mode, but in mastery mode. The zone where warriors made life or death decisions effortlessly, and something else shifts. The vagus nerve, usually suppressed by modern stress, begins firing with renewed strength once the breath cycle ends. That creates a paradoxical state. Your body is primed for battle, but your mind feels anchored, stable, controlled fire, grounded intensity, the exact psychological profile of a fighter walking into a storm without flinching. The more you practice, the more this becomes your baseline. Stress hits you and bounces off. Cold bites you and you welcome it. Life pressures tighten, and instead of breaking, you feel yourself becoming sharper, not calmer, stronger. This is the mind the modern world tries to hide from you. Transformation doesn't happen in a blur. It happens in stages. Predictable, measurable, almost mechanical. Once you follow the fire breath protocol with precision, this is not motivation. This is physiology unfolding on a timeline your ancestors once lived by. And if you stay consistent, the changes arrive faster than you expect. Day 1. The first ignition. You feel warmth rising from the abdomen hours after you finish the session. Not imagined, measurable. Your hands stay warmer, your breath steadier, your mind unusually alert. This is the sympathetic spike, carving its first groove into your nervous system. Day 7. Cold begins to lose its sting. The first shock still hits you, but it no longer dominates you. Your shivering threshold shifts. Your brown fat, once dormant, now flickers awake the moment temperature drops. People around you complain about the chill. You notice it, but it doesn't own you. Day 14. Your metabolism changes gears. Hunger patterns shift. Energy becomes more stable. Sleep deepens because the vagus nerve has begun recalibrating. Morning grogginess weakens. You wake with the sense that something inside is rebuilding itself. Day 30. Your heat response becomes automatic. You step into cold and feel a surge rising through your spine instead of shrinking away. The internal furnace lights with minimal prompting. Your focus sharpens through the day. Stress feels different, smaller. Day 60. The Viking threshold. Cold becomes a training partner, not an adversary. Fat loss progresses even on days without intense exercise. Your resilience, mental and physical, becomes unmistakable. You have crossed from adaptation to transformation. This timeline isn't a fantasy, it's a blueprint. Follow it, and your biology obeys. There's a reason this practice was hidden, protected, whispered only among warrior circles and monastic adepts. Power without control is dangerous, and fire breath is raw power. Modern people treat breathwork like a toy, a wellness trend, something you sprinkle between emails. But this technique isn't decorative. It rewires core survival circuits. Mishandle them, and the system bites back. Here is the truth most teachers avoid, because it scares people. If you rush the breath cycles, you can drop CO2 too fast and send your brainstem into a panic spiral. If you push the retentions beyond your current capacity, blood pressure can spike. If you practice standing or near water, a single wave of dizziness could drop you. This is why ancient traditions demanded stillness, discipline, and readiness before initiation. Not because of mysticism, but because the nervous system is a loaded weapon when activated improperly. Pregnant individuals, people with uncontrolled hypertension, epilepsy, or cardiovascular instability should not perform fire breath without medical oversight. Not because the technique is flawed, but because its intensity is real. Even healthy practitioners must respect the rules. Never practice while driving. Never practice while submerged. Never practice in a moment of emotional volatility. Fire amplifies what's already there. And yet, this very danger is what makes the technique extraordinary. The world has dulled human beings with comfort, softness, overprotection. Fire breath is the opposite, a controlled encounter with your own biological extremes. That's why it was guarded. That's why it was feared. And that's why, once you learn to wield it, nothing in your body or mind will ever function the same way again. Most people will read everything you've just learned and walk away unchanged. They'll nod, they'll feel inspired for a moment, and then they'll sink back into the familiar softness that has kept their inner fire asleep for years. But you, if you've made it this far, if something in your chest feels like it's waking up, you're not like them. You're standing at the threshold of a path only the rare ever walk, a path of heat, discipline, danger, and rebirth. The fire breath isn't a concept anymore. It's a tool in your hands, a weapon, a switch that flips your biology from passive to powerful, from cold to forged. And now comes the moment that separates observers from warriors. Action. Not tomorrow. Not when you're ready. The body doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It responds to command, to will, to repetition. If you do your first round today, just one round, the furnace begins its awakening. If you wait, the world wins. Comfort wins. The softness wins. You already know what that life feels like. You've lived it. But the other life, the one where your breath bends cold, where your metabolism roars, where your mind sharpens instead of crumbling, that life is waiting on the other side of 20 minutes of discipline. So here is my challenge, spoken with absolute conviction. Begin the protocol today. Light the spark. Fight the chill. Become the person your biology still remembers. This is your fire. Claim it.